Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation today. So, last time that Ronnie interviewed me for his Love Fruit podcast, he asked me as his last question, what did I think about the relationship between mindset and the success with the raw vegan diet? And back then, I shared with him a little bit of the literature that I reviewed on this subject and also my personal experience. But I was not really prepared to share some in-depth, thoughts about this subject. So Ronnie's question really motivated me to look things up and just, give it a thought. And that's why today my presentation goes about the role of mindset in our success with a raw vegan diet. And the title of my presentation is Food Related Worldviews and Their Impact on Health Outcomes in the Raw Vegan Movement. And I choose to talk about food related worldviews because on my 80 years on the raw vegan journey, I have experienced and also seen a lot of people struggling with different kind of beliefs, which I actually later figured out that these kind of beliefs are often holding people back from succeeding with the raw vegan diet. So in my today's presentation, I will talk about the worldviews in the general context because I think that most of you probably heard about this term before, but maybe you are not like exactly sure what the worldviews are. And then I will talk about how the worldviews relate to the food choices we make. Then I will move on to discuss six common worldviews in the raw vegan movement. Some of them are controversial, so it will be interesting discussion, and I think you will probably find this part very interesting. And then I will talk about how the worldviews influence the health outcomes potentially, and I will close this presentation with conclusion and recommendations. So, so what are the worldviews? Well, worldviews can be defined in many ways, but I like to look at them as lenses through which we perceive and, as a result of that, experience the world around us. So, in this slide, you can see the traditional nutrition related worldviews in the mainstream society. And when you look at these lenses, when you just talk to anybody who is following the standard diet and you ask them where they get protein from, they will tell you, I get my protein from meat. If you ask them about fat, most of the people will refer to so-called healthy oils. If you ask them about calcium, they will probably mention milk and dairy products. If you ask them about omega 3 fatty acids, most of the people will mention fish. And if you ask them about where do they get iron from, most of the people in the mainstream dietary movement will tell you that red meat is a great source of iron. And so, people who are following the mainstream diet are maybe not so much aware that all these nutrients can be actually obtained from elsewhere. And we are all here really interested in the raw vegan diet. So, let me now show you how all these nutrients can look through the lenses of a healthy raw vegan. So, if you ask a raw vegan who has been doing this for some time and who understands a little bit about nutrition, and you ask where do you get your protein from, most people will tell you that protein is present in all foods, but that the vegetables are the most concentrated source of protein per calorie. If you ask raw vegans about fat, most people will tell you that they get fat from nuts, seeds, and avocados. If you ask them about calcium, many people will mention oranges, but also leafy green vegetables. If you ask people about omega 3 fatty acids, most raw vegans will tell you that chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds, and walnuts are an excellent source of omega 3 fatty acids. And if you ask people about where do they get iron from, most people will tell you, will probably mention watermelon, berries, and leafy green vegetables. So as you can see, depending on what kind of worldviews you have been exposed to and what kind of belief system you have inside of yourself, your worldviews about nutrition can be radically different. So I just want to point out here, like how much how big this difference can be. So worldviews basically represent what we consider to be normal. And if you're somebody coming from the mainstream society, meat is for you the normal source of protein. If you're somebody who has educated himself or herself about alternative ways of nutrition, vegetables can be the perfect source of protein for you. And so these worldviews, while we are believing them, they are very, very strongly influencing our day-to-day experience. But what is the good news is that our worldviews can change depending on our experience and depending on our knowledge. So um, it's something that we can definitely work on, and we are not destined to, like be slave of our worldviews. We can definitely change them. So, besides influencing our perspective on the world around us and how we think the world should be, our worldviews are also influencing how we perceive and experience ourselves. And so, in this picture here, in this slide here, I try to depict myself in the different roles that I have taken throughout my life, especially in the last 15 years. So, you can see that. I can call myself a wife. I can call myself a manager of a scientific network. I can call myself a daughter, a mother, a scientist, and content creator. And all these views are representing a kind of positive image that I hold about myself. But unfortunately, and I dare to say that most of us uh, not only have the positive worldviews about ourselves, but we also hold some negative worldviews, which can kind of invite doubt into our life. And, is this negative self talk, which is continuously questioning and doubting whether we are good enough. So, in my negative self talk, I often ask myself whether I'm a good wife, whether I'm a good manager, whether I'm a good daughter, whether I'm a good mother, whether I'm a good scientist, and whether I'm a good content creator. And it's very easy to doubt myself because comparison is the best way to start to feel less and start to feel less confident. Because if I look around, for example, on Instagram, and I see all these content creators and raw vegans creating these beautiful reels and making beautiful pictures and creating recipes, I'm just asking myself, like, why am I doing all of this? There are so many other people who are doing it, and they're so much better than me. So this inner voice is always there, and it's really important to learn to manage it, because if it becomes too loud, it can really create some not pleasant experiences in our life. So in the next couple of slides, I would like to talk about how do we acquire our worldviews. And maybe you remember that I said that the worldviews can have the positive perspective on life, but they can also have negative perspective on life. So how do we acquire these worldviews? Well, we start to acquire worldviews when we are babies, because the baby is born and the baby is 100% dependent on the care that is given to the baby by the parents, most of the time the mother, who is also, just giving the breast milk to the baby. And so the baby, when it's born, it communicates through crying, and at the beginning it can't really make facial expressions, so it's basically communication by contentment, and by discontentment, that means by crying. And so when the baby is discontent and it cries, and it's oftentimes very difficult for mother to understand exactly what the baby needs, but most of the time what the baby needs is food, or it needs emotional attention, or it needs a diaper change. And so when the baby cries and he learns that crying leads to a response by somebody else, the caretaker, then the baby starts to establish beliefs that it matters, that he can express what he needs, and those needs are going to be attended to. But unfortunately, in our modern society, especially when I had my first daughter, I was told that I shouldn't always give attention to my baby because I'm going to spoil it. And it was suggested to me that I should let it cry until it falls asleep. Luckily, I didn't do this because it never felt really comfortable for me. But it created also a little bit of doubts and insecurities about what kind of approach was the right one to take. And so, when we let babies cry, they learn that no matter how hard they try, basically, then they don't matter. And so, they start to form their perception about the world around them based on these experiences. So, in this case, I would like to mention that in the beginning of our life, our worldviews are mostly formed by the parents, the family that the baby is exposed to, and possibly the caregivers if the baby goes to the daycare or, there is like some nanny or somebody who is helping with the baby. Then, when we are getting into our young years, like, I don't know, 2 to 4 years old or 2 to 6 years old, we are mostly influenced by our parents, family, but also friends in the kindergarten and caregivers. And so the kind of experiences that we experience during this time are really creating a sort of a base program for how we are going to respond to many situations later in our life. And then when we are teenagers, next to the parents, family, and friends, we of course get exposed to social media and internet. So the influences that we experience are a little bit bigger than when we were small children. And then when we are adults, of course, most of us find partners with whom we live or share the household. And this definitely has a big experience, a big influence on how we perceive the world around us, but also ourselves. And of course, social media, internet, parents, family, friends, and colleagues at work also play a big role. But if we look at these different stages of our life, we can somehow conclude that parents and family and friends are really important influence of how we perceive ourselves and the world around us throughout our life. So this sort of makes me to conclude that our worldviews are basically significantly shaped by our attachment relationships. And what are these attachment relationships and why are they so important? I'm going to explain this in the following slide. So, the role of attachment relationships in worldview formation. So, in this slide, you see me being 40 weeks pregnant with my third daughter, Dominica, while I'm baby bearing my first daughter, who was 3 years old back then, Elizabeth. And so this picture is really descriptive of what I wrote on this slide. So we are who we are hanging out with. It really matters who we are exposed to and who we share our life with, because those people really significantly shape the worldviews and also the perception about ourselves. So attachment, when we feel closely related to somebody, so we feel attached to somebody, it means that attachment is a deep and enduring emotional bond that connects one person to another person across time and space. And I like that they mention in this definition that attachment connects people across time and space, because these attachment relationships are also significant in the modern days when we are connecting with other people via internet. And you can imagine that you can find friends, for example, on Instagram, who are in the totally different part of the world, and you can still feel friendship and attachment, and you kind of want to manage this attachment because you feel like you experience positive benefits from maintaining even this long distance relationship. So, according to my favorite author, whose name is Dr. Gabor Matei, and his colleague, Dr. Gabor Neufeld, there are 6 ways of attaching. And these 6 ways of attaching, of which I'm only going to share 4 with you to keep it simple, come from the book that they wrote together, and it's called "Hold On to Your Kids: Why Parents Should Matter More Than the Peers." And you may now be all wondering, what is she talking about? How is this on the earth relating to the raw vegan diet and the health outcomes? Well, this relates to the raw vegan diet and your health outcomes very much because we all once were children and we learn during that time that there are certain ways we attach to others, and we are social beings, so we are always going to experience attachment relationships, and I will elaborate on the quality of these attachment relationships later. So let me just pause here and not get ahead of me and tell you how do we basically attach to other people. So the first way that we attach to other people is through senses. So we naturally seek closeness, connection, and contact. And this can be through, just being in the proximity of somebody. So when you are in the physical proximity of somebody, it can feel very calming if that person gives you signal that it's safe and, just makes you feel very good. So we connect through senses. But we can also connect through contact. So let's say that we are on social media, we are researching the raw vegan lifestyle, and we found a few accounts that we really like. So we exchange some DM messages, and let's say that the other person responds, and we feel like, oh yeah, this person is it's cool. It has I don't know how many thousand followers, and it responds to me. So I really feel like it's nice. This person is very nice. And so when we feel that somebody is nice, we really like to be seen as significant by that person. So, in other words, if we really like somebody, we tend to seek approval from that person, which can be no problem if this is a healthy attachment relationship, but it can also lead us to very unfortunate situation and circumstances if that attachment relationship is not healthy. So the third way of attaching to other people is seamless. So if you are finding somebody on social media who is really your idol, like you really would like to be like that person, you will try to imitate that person and somehow identify with that person. And I would like to mention here that there is nothing wrong with imitation and identification because it's our natural way of growing and progressing. We it's absolutely amazing if we are inspired by other people, but this inspiration should create positive experiences in our life and not the experiences of feeling miserable. And I have the feeling that oftentimes in raw vegan movement, this happens pretty often. And so the last way of attaching is through belonging and loyalty. So, if you feel connected to somebody, you are seeking significance, you want to imitate that person, you really want to be like that person, and you also want to belong to community. So you are likely to be obedient and follow the rules of the community because you feel that if you don't, you probably may be excluded. And in this situation, let me think of example. It can be that you want to belong in the raw vegan community, so you are extremely shameful and afraid from about eating cooked food. So whenever you eat cooked food, you feel like horrible guilt and shame, and that doesn't create a very good experiences in our life. So in summary, the quality of our attachment relationships can be measured by the level of authenticity. So, what does it mean to be authentic? So, to be authentic means that we can be ourselves, irrespectively of what other people are going to think about us. So here you see me with my second daughter, Christina, and with my children, I find it important that they can be angry, that they can express their emotions, that they can be themselves and know that they are not going to be rejected. So the quality of attachment relationships can be measured by authenticity. Now, let me talk about the quality of authentic attachment relationships. So, I have noticed that people who are experiencing authentic attachment relationships, so they're able to be themselves in relation to other people, they seem to have authentic relationship with themselves. So that means that when these people experience some need, They are not thinking twice whether they should pay attention to their needs. They are not going to put everybody else first. They are really going to do what's necessary for them to feel good. And in addition to this, I have also noticed that these people tend to seek desired or desirable experiences in spite of what other people think of them, or in spite of the possibility that they can fail. There is like not much guilt and shame involved in people who have authentic attachment relationships. But on the other hand, people who are coming or are in fake attachment relationships, this is the term that I invented myself. It's not a scientific term. I just thought it was, representing the kind of attachment relationship. So the fake attachment relationship mean that in order to be accepted, we need to act certain ways, because somewhere early in our life we learned that certain behaviors are approved and certain behaviors are not. And when we engage in the approved behaviors, we are lovable. And when we engage in the behaviors that are not approved, we are not lovable. And so people who come from the fake attachment relationships usually experience inauthentic relationship with themselves. That means that these kind of people tend to put everything else first before their own needs. And it also seems like that these people are able to avoid the desired experiences due to the fear of losing approval. So, in summary, authentic attachment relationships broaden our possibilities, and the fake attachment relationships limit our possibilities. And in addition to that, just to make it really, really clear so that everybody really remembers what I'm trying to say here. When we are engaged in authentic attachment relationships, we are going to preserve our own authenticity at any cost. While when we are trapped in the fake attachment relationships, we are willing to lose our authenticity for the sake of earning approval. And this will become significant later when we start to talk about the food choices and food beliefs in the raw vegan movement. So let me move on 6 food related worldviews in the high carb, low fat, raw vegan movement. So I'm going to reveal the ones that I chose for today's discussion. And some of them, actually, most of them will be probably controversial, but the reason why I choose these worldviews is that these are statements independent on what kind of person you are. Are you authentic with yourself, or are you inauthentic with yourself? You are going to probably have a different interpretation and different understanding of these statements. So the first one I chose is eat enough calories. This is the statement that is like repeated all over and all over in the raw vegan movement. And I see that it serves some people while it harms others. The second one is vegetables slow detox. I have seen this a lot of time, people fearing eating vegetables because they thought that they will not be pure enough to heal. Another one is fruit sugar is healthy. And of course, fruit sugar is healthy, but that doesn't mean that we should be eating unlimited amount of fruit sugar and there will be no health consequences for us, because that's simply not the truth. There is some limit and some boundaries for everything, and nothing should be consumed in excess because that results in just negative health outcomes in our body. So the next one is be mindful of fat, and this one is also a very, very interesting one in the raw vegan movement. So we will discuss that in details soon. And the next one is don't worry about protein, because people tend to think that as long as they eat enough fruits and vegetables, they are getting enough protein, which is true. But there are some extremes which prove this statement wrong. We will discuss that later. And the last one, which is very controversial, and I really like to include this one here today, is cooked food is toxic. And let me just move one by one and we'll look at few of these statements closely so that we can analyze together how our worldviews coming from the authentic self or inauthentic self are going to make us interpret these statements. So the first one is eat enough calories. And if you are somebody whose worldviews are based on fear of losing approval, you may be thinking that you need to eat XYZ amount of bananas a day to feel good. And this means that you may be forcing yourself to eat certain amount of bananas because you believe that if you eat enough calories from bananas, you are going to feel satiated and you are not going to fall off the raw vegan. So this person can also believe that even if I don't like the taste of bananas anymore, I still need to eat them because I need to meet my calorie needs, and if I don't, I will not be successful with the raw vegan diet. And if you are somebody like this, thinking this way, you may experience that eating a fruit based diet is challenging and not enjoyable. And therefore, you may find it very, very difficult, and maybe you feel like it doesn't work for you. On the other hand, if you're somebody whose worldviews are based on authenticity with yourself, so you are always true to yourself and you don't care what other people prescribe to you, you are just always listening your body language, you may think that I need to eat as many bananas as I enjoy, no more and no less. You may also feel that if I don't feel like eating bananas, maybe my diet has too much fat in it, or maybe I'm eating too little variety, because if we keep on eating the same thing over and over again, well, our body likes to have variety for feeling good. So it will just communicate this with us. And if you are somebody who is true to themselves, you may experience that eating a fruit based diet is easy and enjoyable. And if you struggle, you are probably pushing yourself in the wrong direction. That's something that you may be aware of. The next one is be mindful of fat. And so if you're somebody who is, just coming from the fear-based worldviews, you may feel that to feel good, I need to stay away from overfat. Because you read somewhere that adding overfat in your diet is interfering with insulin sensitivity, and you think that whatever kind of fat you include in your diet is going to harm you. You may also believe that all overt fat is made equal and that all overt fat interferes with insulin sensitivity. And so, if you have a worldview like this or mindset like this, you may experience that eating a fruit based diet is challenging, not enjoyable, and therefore it doesn't work for you. On the other hand, if you're somebody who is staying true to yourself and who has authentic relationship with yourself, you may feel that in order to feel good, I enjoy adequate amount of fat for my body's needs. You may also be aware that all overt fat is not made equal and appropriate amounts do not interfere with insulin sensitivity. And if you're somebody who is a little bit flexible, you might experience that eating a fruit based diet is easy and enjoyable. And if I struggle, I'm probably pushing myself in the wrong direction. The next one is don't worry about protein. And this one is a nice one because, I see a lot of times this rhetoric repeated online. If you eat enough calories, you are eating enough protein. But there can be occasions when you are actually not eating enough protein, because if you focus your diet on just sweet fruits like bananas or persimmons. And if you look in the chronometer, you will find out that the sweet fruit is quite high in calories. But even if you eat 2000 calories of the sweet fruit, you are actually not going to meet all your protein needs. So, this is an interesting question. So, if you are somebody whose worldview is based on fear, you may feel that sweet fruit has the optimal ratio of protein for human needs. And, everybody says that. So, why should I eat vegetables? Vegetables slow detox. I'm just going to eat sweet fruit. And you may feel like eating protein rich foods such as vegetables is not necessary. And then you may be struggling and finding the diet challenging and feeling like it doesn't work for you. On the other hand, if you're somebody who is always connected to your body language, you may feel that when you eat only sweet fruit, that you are actually not feeling satiated, that you actually miss something in your diet. And so you may be aware that in order to meet your protein needs, while consuming appropriate amount of calories, you can enjoy significant amount of vegetables in your diet. And you may be aware that eating protein rich foods such as vegetables not only improves your protein profile, but it also increases the intake of important minerals. And if you have approach like this to your diet, you can also experience that to eat a fruit-based diet is actually quite easy. And if you struggle, maybe you are pushing yourself in the wrong direction. So the next one is cooked food is toxic. And if you're somebody who really seeks approval, significance, and want to belong in the raw vegan community, you may believe that in order to achieve optimal health, you must avoid all cooked food at all cost. And you may also believe that all cooked food is made equal and is toxic to the human body. And if you have this kind of worldview, you can also feel that eating a fruit based diet is challenging and not enjoyable, and therefore it just doesn't work for you. On the other hand, when you're somebody who is open minded and connected to your body's needs, you may feel like vegetables, tubers, whole grains, and legumes are healthy. And you may be aware that not all cooking methods are created equal, and that steaming is not the same as frying. And if you have approach like this, you can also experience that eating fruit-based diets is actually quite easy. And if you are experiencing difficulties, you are probably pushing yourself too much in the wrong direction. So, with this slide, I would like to summarize um, these statements, these four statements that we closely look together. And I would like to tell you that all these worldviews that we have about food, they all comes either from conscious mind or from subconscious mind. So if we are having those healthy worldviews when we are connected to our body's needs, when we are not driven by rules of the movement or society, we are basically operating from conscious mind, and that means that we are operating from the present moment experiences. Whereas, on the other hand, when we are coming from this fear based approach, we are always thinking about the past experiences and sort of projecting them into the future. So, you may had experience when you just, ate more fat, and maybe it was the wrong kind of fat, or maybe you combined it in the wrong way, and you just felt like, oh, this doesn't feel good. And you just, because of that, may believe that all overt fat at any amount is just wrong for you, it's bad for you. So the conscious mind is basically open mind, is authentic open mind, and the subconscious mind is fear based. It's always fearing the future outcomes, and it always want to avoid those future outcomes, but it can really create some negative experiences in our life. So, worldviews and the health outcomes in the raw vegan movement. So, you may already expect what kind of health outcomes I'm going to be talking about in relationship to authentic base relationship with ourselves or the fear based relationship with ourselves. But let me just summarize it here on this slide. So, basically, people who have authentic relationship with themselves and are always paying attention to their own needs usually eat a large variety of fruits and vegetables. They eat adequate amount of calories for their individual energy needs. That means that they are not overeating, but they are not undereating. They are just, eating what their body needs. People who are successful with the raw vegan diet long term seems to be including an adequate amount of overt fat in their diet, so they're not fat phobic. They know what amount of fat and what kind of fat serves their health the best. And they're also usually having a healthy relationship with cooked food. So they are not cooked food phobic, and they're willing to include some cooked food in their diet whenever it is necessary. So, in conclusion, a healthy relationship with oneself usually leads to healthy eating habits. On the other hand, when we have somebody who is coming from the fear based worldviews. These people usually just overfocus on few foods and they limit variety of foods they are eating in their diet. They're oftentimes over consuming or under consuming calories because when we are limiting the foods we eat, we either tend to overconsume it or our body makes us not like it and then we just undereat. Also, the people who experience health issues on the raw vegan diets seems to be excluding overfed 100%, and they seem to be fearing cooked food. And here as well as with the other example, it seems that an unhealthy relationship with oneself leads to unhealthy eating habits. So, just to summarize this, it seems that when we are authentic with our body's needs, we tend to experience healthy body and mind. And when we are acting out of fear, um, we seem to be experiencing overweight, underweight, cravings, and lack of energy. And just let me tell you here that this presentation is based on my own experience. I experienced the fear-based approach to raw vegan diet, and it made me lose weight. It made me gain weight. It made me have no energy. So I'm kind of, knowing what I'm talking about here. So I would like to conclude this presentation with just some conclusion and recommendation and discuss how to find out what keeps us stuck. So the first point that I think it's very important to realize when we feel stuck is to realize that self-validation is extremely important and that our body works for us and not against us. So whenever we have cravings, we shouldn't look at cravings as our enemies. We should look at our cravings as our best friend because when we have cravings, it's basically just our body telling us that something is not okay and something needs our attention, something needs to be improved and addressed. The second point is self observation. So, non judgmental observation of our thoughts and actions through journaling. And journaling is really amazing because when you are only thinking in your head, you are often going to miss very important thoughts, which are like repeating themselves in your head and you are not even aware of them and they are really keeping you stuck. And these thoughts may be related to, like eat unlimited amount of bananas or you should not be eating this avocado even though you crave it, and you just, when you start to write it down, it's much easier to become aware of what's really going on um, in your head. The next one is education. And as many of you know, I am a really big proponent of education. I have multiple university degrees and a doctorate degree, so I'm really big into studying. I really enjoy it. And I feel that learning from successful people who have a long-term experience is a really good idea. And when I study, I like to refrain from relying on one approach. I really like to review a lot of approaches, study a lot of books, and just review people who really seemed like they put a lot of work in what they write, and then based on that, just make my own conclusion and choose my own approach. Like, don't rely just on one somebody who tells you that this is the way to do it, because oftentimes it may not work for you. And the last one is choose who you are hanging out with. This is something that I mentioned throughout the presentation, and I find it's very important because, if you are trying approach of somebody who has million followers online, but this approach is still resulting in cravings and maybe agitation or lack of good quality sleep, maybe it means that this approach is not for us and we need to modify it. And we don't have to be afraid of changing the approach because um, we really need to stay true and authentic to ourselves and not do what we think other people expect us to do. So I would like to conclude this presentation by sharing this quote with you. So it goes like, the most successful and talented people are seeking the slippery hills. And this quote comes from my current read, which is called The Talent Quote by Daniel Coyle. And I think this quote pretty much summarizes my presentation today, because if you are somebody who is authentic with yourself, you are able to step beyond your fear-based mind, and you are going to explore different approaches so that you can find out which of these approaches suits your health need the most. And the last quote that I would like to really conclude this presentation with, and I really would like you to remember it for the many years to come, is that perfection is the antithesis of authenticity. So every time you are trying to get it right and get it perfect, you can be 100% sure that you are compromising your true needs and your true self. So I hope that this presentation um, gives you some inspiration and some food for thoughts, so we can have some nice and lively discussion afterwards. So thank you so very much, and I'm looking forward to discuss this topic with you.